The galaxy was silent. The mighty Revkor Empire, once feared by hundreds of worlds, had been defeated by a single planet, Earth. But few in the Galactic Council could believe what came next. Humanity didn't celebrate, didn't demand surrender, and didn't hide. Instead, they began to build. Commander Mason Hale stood in the new orbital yard above Earth. Giant cranes moved slowly, assembling ships made of metal, rock, and courage. They were not fancy like alien vessels, but strong, built by human hands and powered by determination. Around him, engineers and pilots worked day and night. Some were former miners, others teachers, and even farmers. Humanity was no longer defending itself. It was preparing to strike back. "Status report," Mason said, walking beside Captain Nora Quinn. "All systems ready," she replied proudly. "We have 12 long-range cruisers and over 50 small fighters. We call them wolves." Mason smiled faintly. "Good name. Let's show them how wolves hunt." Across the galaxy, in the dark halls of the Ravkor Imperial Citadel, panic grew. The Emperor's Council shouted over each other. "They are sending ships toward us. It's impossible. Humans don't have faster-than-light tech." "They learned it," whispered the Emperor. Indeed, they had. Humans had captured wrecked alien ships during the invasion. They studied them, took them apart, and learned faster than anyone had thought possible. When Mason's fleet launched from Earth, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. It wasn't the size of the fleet that frightened the galaxy. It was the fact that humans were coming. On the Galactic Council's main screen, ambassadors watched as human ships jumped from one system to another. Each time they arrived, they didn't attack civilians or colonies. Instead, they targeted the Ravkor war factories, freeing enslaved races that had been under their control for generations. In one such system, the planet Taraxis had been enslaved for 100 years. When the Ravkor patrol saw strange ships entering orbit, they prepared to fire until they saw the human insignia, a blue globe surrounded by a ring of stars. A human voice echoed through every communication channel. "People of Taraxis, this is Commander Mason Hale of Earth. You are free," the alien citizens cried. For the first time in a century, the Ravkor guards surrendered without a fight. At the council, Ambassador Threx stood before the assembly. "You all saw what they did. They freed a world, and they didn't take it for themselves. They only asked for peace." The elder speaker frowned. "Peace by starting another war?" Threx shook his head. "No. They are teaching the galaxy a lesson, that strength is not in power but in the will to protect others." The chamber fell silent. Deep inside, every species in the council understood something new. Humanity was no longer a new race in the stars. They were leaders. Meanwhile, deep in Ravkor space, the once proud warlord Kraxthar sat inside his fortress, staring at a hologram of his destroyed fleets. His claws trembled. Every time humans appeared, his soldiers lost heart. "They fight like ghosts," his advisor said. "They never strike the same way twice. They appear, attack, and vanish before we can react," Kraxthar snarled. "Find them!" But before his scanners could locate the human fleet, alarms blared. The stars around their planet began to distort. Then, a fleet of human ships appeared out of hyperspace, glowing blue against the darkness. At the center was Mason Hale's flagship, the Resolute. "Open channel," Mason ordered. When the screen connected, Kraxthar's face appeared, full of rage and disbelief. You dare come to my homeworld?" Mason's voice was calm, steady. "You brought war to mine. This is just the return trip," Kraxthar growled. "Do you think you can destroy the Ravkor Empire?" Mason shook his head. "No, we're not here to destroy you. We're here to end this, so no one ever tries to invade Earth again." He raised his hand and the order went out. The human fleet fired, not at cities or people, but at weapon factories, orbital cannons, and military command hubs. Within minutes, the Ravkor Empire's war machine went silent. The people of Ravkor watched from below as their own armies surrendered. They had never seen mercy in war before, and until now. Back at the Galactic Council, the news arrived like thunder. The screen showed the once feared empire lowering its flags. Every alien world that had once served the Ravkor now sent messages of thanks, not to the Council, but to Earth. Ambassador Threx stood in awe. "They could have taken everything," he said softly. "But they didn't," the elder speaker nodded slowly. Perhaps that's what makes them dangerous. They fight harder than anyone, yet they never fight for power. They fight for home. A week later, Mason Hale stood on a balcony overlooking Earth. The stars above looked peaceful again. Captain Nora Quinn joined him, her face lit by the soft light of orbiting ships. "It's finally over," she said. Mason shook his head slightly. "Peace never lasts forever. But this time they'll think twice before coming back," she smiled. "You think the galaxy fears us now?" He looked up at the stars and replied quietly, "Not fear, respect." In the months that followed, humans didn't build an empire. They built alliances. The freed worlds joined under a new banner called the Terran Coalition, formed not to conquer but to protect. Human engineers helped rebuild alien cities. Human teachers shared their knowledge with new friends. And for the first time, the galaxy saw humanity's true strength. Not just their weapons, but their compassion. Everywhere they went, one phrase began to spread among alien worlds. "Do not mistake kindness for weakness, they are from Earth." Years later, in a classroom on a peaceful alien planet, a young student raised her hand and asked, "Teacher, is it true? Did humans really defeat the Ravcor all by themselves?" The teacher smiled. "Yes, child. But more than that, they taught us all something, and what's that?" The child asked. "That courage is not born from strength," the teacher said gently. "It's born from the will to protect what you love." The humans didn't fight to conquer. They fought because someone tried to take their home. Far beyond that classroom, in a quiet corner of the galaxy, an old Ravcor veteran placed a small human flag on his wall, a blue circle with white stars. He looked at it for a long moment and whispered, "We invaded their world once, and we never forgot what we learned." In the Galactic Council Hall, a new law was passed, written in every known language. No member shall ever invade Earth or any of its allies. And beside that law, on a stone plaque, the Council engraved a message for all future generations to read. They came from a small world of storms and fire. They were tested by chaos and pain. They stood when others fell. And when the galaxy thought they would break, humanity smiled. As the stars continued to shine over Earth, Commander Mason Hale's final words during his farewell speech echoed through every system. "We didn't start this war, but we finished it. We're not the strongest or the oldest, and just the most stubborn. So remember this, never mistake Earth's silence for weakness." The first day of invasion had ended in confusion for the Ravcor Empire. Their proud warriors, trained for centuries in galactic wars, were shocked. They had never seen a world fight like Earth. Commander Mason Hale watched the glowing dots on the map fade one by one. Each dot represented a destroyed enemy landing site. He stood with his arms crossed, his face calm but his eyes sharp. The air in the war room was tense but filled with hope. "Report," he said quietly. A young officer spoke fast. "Sir, all major cities are holding. Civilians are safe underground. We've taken down 37 alien ships in orbit. But they're still coming. More dropships from the main fleet." Mason nodded. "Then we keep adapting. They learn fast, but we learn faster." He turned toward the big screen showing a live feed of burning deserts and wrecked ships. "These aliens think we're weak because we smile, because we talk about peace. They don't understand what peace costs." High above Earth on the Ravcor flagship Iron Fang, Commander Crackstar slammed his fist against his console. "Impossible," he roared. "They are using primitive weapons. How are we losing to this dirtball species?" His advisor, a thin, gray-skinned Ravcor scientist, spoke carefully. They do not follow patterns, sir. Every time we counter one move, they change their tactics. Their chaos makes no sense," Crackstar growled. "Then burn their cities. Make them fear us." Within minutes, his fleet launched plasma strikes toward major human centers. Fire rained across the sky. But as the bright explosions hit, nothing was destroyed. Every major city's energy grid had vanished from the map. The Ravcor sensors screamed in confusion. Their targets were gone. On Earth, Mason smiled as he watched the smoke clouds rise harmlessly into the sky. "EMP decoys worked," he said. "They aimed at fake cities. That should buy us time." At the same time, the Galactic Council was still watching every moment from their orbiting chamber. Their screens showed both sides of the fight, the Ravcor rage and the human determination. Ambassador Threx paced nervously. "They told us humans were dangerous, but this is beyond logic," another council member whispered. "They fight without fear. They don't even have energy shields." Threx stared at the human soldiers charging across ruined streets with courage that defied reason. That's because their shield, he said softly, is their will. Down on the ground in the middle of a ruined field, a group of old veterans stood around a campfire. They wore mismatched armor, some from old wars, some homemade, but their spirits burned brighter than any weapon. An old man named Sergeant Cole, gray-haired and calm, looked up at the night sky where alien ships moved like stars. "You know," he said to the younger soldiers beside him, "I thought I'd never see another invasion in my lifetime." One young recruit asked, "Are you scared, sir?" Cole smiled. "Scared? Son, this is Earth. Fear's just another word for alive." A moment later, the ground shook. Alien mechs appeared at the edge of the valley, glowing in red lights. But before they could fire, human trucks rolled forward, launching old artillery shells that lit up the sky like fireworks. The aliens fired back with plasma beams, melting steel, but humans didn't stop. They kept fighting, crawling, and repairing even under fire. One alien commander shouted in disbelief, "They don't retreat!" They laugh while fighting. Indeed, across the valley, the sound of laughter mixed with battle noise. Humans cracked jokes, sang, and shouted encouragement to each other even while surrounded. It confused the enemy completely. At the same time, in orbit, small human crafts appeared. Not warships, but refitted cargo vessels and mining ships armed with missiles. They were led by Captain Nora Quinn, a pilot who had once transported supplies to Mars. Her tiny fleet flew toward a massive RAV-Corps battleship. One of her crew asked nervously, "Captain, that thing's 10 times our size." Nora grinned. "Then we'll hit it 10 times harder." They turned off their radio beacons, pretending to be debris. When the alien ship's shields dropped for maintenance, Nora's team fired everything they had: scrap metal, mining lasers, even cargo pods full of explosives. The explosion tore the giant ship in half. From the Galactic Council viewing hall, Ambassador Threx nearly dropped his datapad. "They just destroyed a dreadnought. With junk," he shouted. Another ambassador whispered, "They are not fighting to win battles. They are fighting to send a message." Back on Earth, Commander Mason Hale walked to the communication desk. "Patch me through to every remaining unit," he ordered. When the line opened, his voice echoed across radios, speakers, and helmets all around the planet. "This is Mason Hale. I know you're tired. I know you're outnumbered. But look at them up there, those ships burning in our sky. They thought Earth would beg for mercy. They were wrong. They don't understand that humans never stop until the job is done. Hold your ground. Make them remember who we are." The reply came from all over: soldiers, farmers, engineers, and miners. They all said the same thing. For Earth. In the Galactic Council chamber, fear grew with every passing hour. Even the strongest empires had never fought like this. A small species from a single planet was resisting an empire that ruled hundreds of worlds. The elder speaker of the council turned to Threx. "What will happen if they win?" Threx looked at the burning fleet on the screen. "If they win," he said slowly, "the galaxy will change forever." By the third day, the invasion was collapsing. The RAV-Corps had lost more ships than ever before. Their generals demanded retreat, but Kraxithar refused. "We cannot lose to these primitives," he roared. But as he spoke, alarms blared across his flagship. Human hackers had entered their communication systems using old radio waves and even music signals. Their computers displayed strange words. "We're coming for you." Kraxithar's eyes widened. "They're in our systems." Moments later, the RAV-Corps fleet's targeting sensors went dark. Then their own missiles turned around, aimed at their own ships. Explosions filled the black sky above Earth. Mason watched the feed in silence. "They'll retreat soon," he said. "Should we chase them?" asked his deputy. Mason shook his head. "Not yet. Let them run home. Let them tell their empire what happens when you mess with humans." Hours later, the skies cleared. Smoke drifted slowly across the cities. People came out from shelters and looked up. The alien ships that once covered the sky were now gone. Only fire trails remained. But Mason knew this was not the end. He stood on the balcony of the command center and whispered, "They'll be back. And next time we'll be ready." He turned to his engineers. "Begin Phase 2. The officer blinked. "Phase 2, sir?" Mason smiled. "If they can reach us, we can reach them." And somewhere across the galaxy, the RAV-Corps survivors screamed in fear as their sensors picked up something impossible. Human ships leaving orbit, heading straight for them. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. The room was silent as the news arrived. Humans weren't hiding anymore. They were preparing to strike back. Ambassador Threx looked around and said quietly, "T." The Galactic Council hall floated quietly above the orange clouds of Virex Prime. Inside, hundreds of alien representatives sat in silence as a message replayed again and again in the air. The transmission came from deep space, a clear military code from the Ravkor Empire, one of the most feared warrior species in the galaxy. The words were short and cold. Target confirmed, planet Earth. Invasion begins at dawn, Sol Standard Time. Gasps filled the room. Some council members hissed in disbelief. Others muttered warnings in their own languages. The name Earth was enough to make even the bravest generals uneasy. Ambassador Threx of Velari, a tall creature with blue glass-like skin, stood up and shouted, "Have they lost their minds? You don't invade a death world." The council turned to him. He continued, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Do they not understand what humans are? They live on a planet that burns, freezes, and shakes every day. Their air is filled with poisons, their animals are monsters, and their oceans hide creatures that could swallow ships whole. And yet they thrive." A small alien diplomat blinked nervously. "But they look harmless," she said. "They're new to the stars. They only joined us 50 years ago." Threx sighed, rubbing his face with trembling hands. "Yes, they look harmless. That's how all predators survive." Across the table, the elder speaker of the council tapped his claw. "We must warn Earth. If the Ravkor invade, it will not end well for anyone." On the other side of the galaxy, far away from the polished halls of the council, Commander Mason Hale stood in a dimly lit war room deep under Cheyenne Mountain. Screens covered the walls, showing lines of alien ships moving closer to Earth's orbit. The room buzzed with quiet tension as officers whispered updates. A young lieutenant ran in and saluted. "Sir, the Galactic Council just sent a priority message. They say the Ravkor are coming. They advise immediate surrender." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Surrender?" He leaned back in his chair and smiled. "They don't know us very well, do they?" He walked slowly to the main screen and stared at the glowing dots representing the invasion fleet. He had seen wars before, on Earth and off it, but this time something inside him felt different. It wasn't fear. It was curiosity. "Open a channel to the council," Mason said. A hologram of Ambassador Threx appeared, his face full of panic. "Commander Hale, you must evacuate your planet. You don't understand who you are facing. The Ravkor destroy worlds. They burn everything. They think you're just soft." Mason's lips curved into a grin. "Soft? Well, that's new. Tell your friends in the council not to worry. We're not scared of monsters. We raised ourselves among them." Before Threx could argue, the hologram faded. Mason turned to his crew. "Activate every defense satellite, scramble the interceptors, and prep orbital cannons. Let's make this interesting." High above the atmosphere, the first wave of Ravkor ships appeared like black shadows against the sun. Their fleet commander, Crackstar, sat on his throne of iron bones, confident and proud. "Pathetic humans," he growled. "We'll take their cities by nightfall. This planet will feed our empire." As their ships began to descend, a strange silence covered the surface of Earth. The council, watching from their distant world, expected to see chaos, panic, running civilians, desperate armies, but instead, they saw calm. Cities shut down power grids, skies filled with drones, and every spaceport launched emergency crafts. Ordinary humans, not soldiers, were preparing defenses. Children were moved underground. Old veterans, some with gray hair and metal arms, walked back into service. On one channel, a Galactic Council observer whispered, "They aren't fleeing." Another replied softly, "They're getting ready." In the command room, Mason received the final transmission from the moon base. "Sir, they're in orbit. Thousands of them." He nodded. "Good, let them look." Outside, the Ravkor ships spread like locusts, scanning continents, oceans, and cities. Then they saw something strange. Nothing moved. "Commander," said one of Crackstar's lieutenants, "there is no resistance. They are hiding." Crackstar grinned. "Then we will smoke them out." He ordered a direct landing. Massive transports burned through the atmosphere, shaking the sky. They landed in deserts, forests, and near coastlines. But the moment their troops stepped onto the ground, the world fought back. The first squad entered a dry desert base in Nevada, thinking it was abandoned. A minute later, static filled the radio. The second squad went silent too. Then suddenly, explosions flashed across the sand. Old tanks, dug-in turrets, and soldiers wearing strange exosuits emerged from underground bunkers. "Welcome to Earth," said a human voice on the open channel. Back in orbit, the Council could barely believe the images. Humans were fighting back with old technology, yes, but with incredible precision and teamwork. Ambassador Threx leaned closer to his screen. "They're not losing," the Council chair hissed. "They're not even afraid." And indeed, across the planet, humanity moved as one. Every race that had ever mocked them now saw the truth. Humans didn't fear war. They adapted to it. In one feed, a farmer in Iowa used his crop drone to drop homemade explosives on alien armor. In another, old submarines launched from deep oceans, firing torpedoes that tore through landing ships. Even the wildlife joined in. Earth storms, earthquakes, and magnetic fields confused RAVCOR systems. Earth itself seemed to fight back. Inside the war room, Mason's voice stayed calm. "Status? All enemy forces engaged, sir." "They're confused. They don't understand our tactics," Mason chuckled. "That's because we don't have any." He turned to his communication officer. "Send one message to the Galactic Council." The officer nodded and transmitted Mason's words. "Tell them they should have done their homework." Far away, on the council station, Threx heard the message and closed his eyes. "Oh no," he whispered. The RAVCOR just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. For the first time, the Galactic Council realized something terrifying. Humanity wasn't just another young species trying to survive. They were survivors by nature, and somewhere high above the Earth, as the RAVCOR ships began to burn in the atmosphere, Commander Mason Hale smiled quietly to himself and said, "Let's show them what happens when you mess with home."